You're wearing a jacket. You must be cold.
Yeah, well, it's a little cold in Atlanta still. And I think we're live with another ATD ATL hangout here. And we have our friend Joe Ganci, our tools expert, authoring tools, who knows everything that there is to know about authoring tools. And when he doesn't know, he's going to go there and ask those guys, the developers, and tell them how to do their job better. Right, Joe?
Pretty much. I can't say I know everything about every tool because there's new tools coming out every single day. So there's always something new to learn. But absolutely, I make it my mission to know as much as possible about the tools that are out there.
Yeah, it's funny when we get into some of those uh, forums specific for people that are testing out tools and all that and doing beta tests. Joe's name is all over the place.
Hmm.
All right, Joe, thank you for joining us. And you're going to soon be here, April 14th, right in Atlanta, doing a workshop on the past, present, and future of authoring tools. Is that right?
That's correct. Yep. Yep. It's one I've done once or twice before, but it's always new and improved because, of course, as I just said, there are new tools coming out every day. So I always have to. It's never something where I can just create it once and then deliver it many times. I have to always be updating it, always stay on top of it. Otherwise, I could look foolish if I'm talking about a tool that either it has been updated tremendously or yeah. So yes, definitely I have to keep that new and refreshed all the time.
Yeah, the tools market keeps you on your toes. Don't-
It does. It does.
so here's the link to the event, actually, if anybody needs. I'm not sure it's going to show up on the Hangout, but we're going to make sure to share it again. We already have several people signed up, Joe, by the way, so it's
Oh,
going to be a
wonderful.
fun
Thank
one.
you. That's great.
We have a few questions here for you. Some of the main questions always revolve around mobile first, and I'm sure you hear that a lot, right? So, for example, CAPTIVATE 8 has some new responsive design features.
Hmm.
Now, are you going to cover any of that in the workshop that you're going to do here for us in Atlanta?
The workshop is really meant to be more of an overview of all the authoring tool market, and so I will speak to which tools do address mobile, of course. I mean that's such an important thing right now, and will be for who knows how long to come, centuries maybe. But anyway, the point is that yes, I'll address it, but I'm not going to be able to in the short time we're going to have to get deeply into that type of subject because it's really going to be an overview of all authoring tools and so on.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, in your view, is there any current tool that, with the whole mobile first trend, right, that we hear? I'm not sure what your take is on mobile first anyway. So, if you want to talk about that a little bit, you can. But are there any tools right now that will make things easier for the developer, for the designer and developer, in creating learning that is conducive to both desktop and mobile at the same time?
Well, there's really two ways that you can make something mobile. You either have your strict going to HTML5 because that's really where mobile's at, right? HTML5 means you're going to be able to go to mobile, right? Now the funny thing is that we're at a position in the industry right now in the history of this industry where we're doing a very slow movement that we're almost at the end of now that has been going from Flash to HTML5.
Mm-hmm.
And HTML5 has been replacing Flash as the preferred technology for delivering e-learning. Having said that, that means that all your mobile devices pretty much can handle HTML5, but a lot of organizations are still stuck back on IE8, IE9, etc., and those don't do HTML5. And so we're at a point now where if a tool can do both, deliver to both of those, you're better off. If a tool can only go to HTML5, it's only going to work for mobile and for newer browsers on your desktop. If a tool can only do Flash, it's been outdated at this point because it's not going to work on mobile devices, etc. Mobile first has become the mantra because, in fact, more and more people are using mobile than using desktops for perusing, the web. Learning is still, by and large, a desktop-based system, for maybe somewhat obvious reasons, but that's changing big time too. And so I think mobile first will become very quickly the new focus for e-learning applications as well.
Mm-hmm. What do you think
I didn't,
mobile?
I didn't really answer the question fully. Simply put, you can go to HTML5. That's one way to do it, or you can go beyond that and go to what's called responsive design. And responsive design is something that few tools can do right now. But responsive design, the difference between responsive design and just straight HTML5 is evident if you go to any website and start to change the browser dimensions on it. Just take the width of the browser window and move it back and forth. And if the contents are changing to accommodate the new dimensions, that's responsive. If they're not, then no, it's not responsive. It's just strictly HTML5. And so if you go to my website, eLearning Joe, you'll find it's responsive because you can take the width and move it back and forth, and you'll find that that the contents actually change. So you can see what it'll look like on a tablet, what it'll look like on a mobile phone as well, and they look different. But they're always one set of code rather than having a desktop version and a mobile version, which is the older way of doing it. But still, a lot of companies do that. Okay.
So you think the market is moving more towards responsive design, whether HTML5 or?
Yeah, it's always HTML5 at this point. Okay, if you're doing responsive, you're doing HTML5. Period. But it's a combination of the technologies that are behind the scenes. And so, if you want to be straightforward, a hardcore programmer, you are working in CSS, Cascade Style Sheets. You're working in Java, working in HTML. But if you're creating e-learning, you don't have to worry about any of that because you can use a tool, or there's at least 2 tools now that do responsive design, and more are coming, I'm sure. But by using those tools, you'll be able to get to responsive design without ever looking at the code.
So basically, not every tool that does HTML5 will do responsive design because they might not be taking advantage of those the dimension controls and all that kind of stuff built into CSS HTML5. Exactly. Is that what you're saying?
The vast majority of e-learning tools will go to HTML5 but do not do responsive design.
So you have to be really careful when you're building your e-learning and be really careful with the dimensions and the sizes of the screens and all that because content might be cut off because it's not readjusting. Although it is accessible via mobile because it's HTML5 and not Flash, the content is not adjusting. Is that right?
It's not adjusting. It won't be cut off. I mean, it is cut off in a sense, but no. I mean, you'll still be able to get to it, but you're going to be doing a lot of scrolling, left and right, up and down, and that's death for e-learning. Nobody wants to scroll left and right when they're doing e-learning. It's the most annoying thing in the world. Okay, maybe short of somebody yelling in your ear the whole day, but or knocking you on the head with a hammer. But it really is something you tend to always avoid when creating e-learning is the forcing the learner to have to scroll. It's just bad.
So if you're looking for a mobile first, or at least let's also focus on our learners that are using mobile and not just completely dumping a desktop, responsive design is key, and picking a tool that does responsive design, if mobile is one of their priorities, that should be a priority as well, right?
Yeah, I would say I'm going to say 75% yes, because sure, you can still do HTML5 and it's still going to work in most cases, but if you really want to make sure it's going to work flawlessly across any number of... The difference is this: if you're not going to do responsive design, you really have to know and have to restrict the mobile devices that are going to be using it, because it's not going to work on some, and it is going to work on others. Now, if you know your audience and you know that they're all using the same, an iPad 2 or greater, or they're using the same iPhone model or Android model or whatever, it's fine. You don't have to worry about it. But if you want to create something that's going to work regardless of what mobile device is being used, then you have to worry about responsive design.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. And with the trend of bring your own device, that seems to be happening a lot these days. You're having less and less control of the sizes of screens and what type of devices people are coming. So it does seem like it's something to consider, at least, right? Responsive.
Yeah, yeah, especially when we're talking about Android, because iPhones tend to have a more uniform approach because they're of course being controlled by the Apple by Apple, and so you don't get that kind of variety that you do with Android. Android devices are much more varied when it comes to the resolutions and the sizes and so on. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. So we had somebody submit a question here for us, and it was asking specifically about Captivate, but I'll just expand that to just any tool. So rapid learning development methods are becoming increasingly necessary, right, in our fast-paced workplace. So do you have any tips on how to maybe build an environment or how to accelerate that? It kind of sounds redundant, right? Accelerate my rapid learning content development.
I want to make sure I
Any best practices on that?
Yeah, I want to make sure I understand the question because when we talk about rapid learning, we're really talking about people who can learn quickly rather than creating rapid learning, which is more of the rapid development. I believe that the person
Mm-hmm.
asked about developing rapidly. Is that right? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, yeah. Any best practices on setting up an environment where rapid design can really take place with these authoring tools that we have in the market nowadays? Any best practices on that?
I recognize this as a reality of the world, but I kind of bristle a little bit at it because it seems like in many cases we're focusing so much on the rapid on the rapidness of the development process and forgetting that this is supposed to serve a purpose. People are supposed to be learning from this, and it's going to help the company bottom line if they can just get more productive in what they're doing, etc. So I see way too many examples of doing it wrong and then in the end having crappy learning that is just not working for people because they're not being given the kind of learning applications that really work. So yes,
Mm-hmm.
it's really, really important that first we step back for a moment and say, are we short-circuiting the process so much that that this is all a waste of time, or can we do it in a way that makes sense? Okay, so to make sense, you definitely want to avoid any potential Murphys, any potential gotchas, right? That's what really slows down the process. And so the problem is that in too many times, what we're doing is we're we're actually making it worse by trying to skip steps. And if you skip asking the right questions at the very beginning of the process, you very well might end up spending a lot more time creating your applications than you would otherwise. If you skip doing a proper design analysis, same thing. If you skip doing a proper set of templates or models or whatever else you need to do, again, you're going to be doing work and rework and rework and rework, and in the end, it just ends up being a lot more time consuming. So the tips are simple. Don't skip steps is number one, okay? Number two is don't avoid analysis paralysis. Don't get so hung up that you're not coming to any real decisions along the way. But make
Mm-hmm.
sure that those decisions are made and that they are signed off on by the stakeholders. And the stakeholders can be anybody who has a vested interest in the learning. And in some cases, that may even include representatives of the learners themselves, depending on the situation that you're in. So that would be my number one thing is don't barrel through the process so quickly, thinking that you're saving time, because you're going to end up making a mess of things big time. I've seen it happen over and over. I've been doing this for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
and I've seen it happen over and over. And one of my most popular webinars I've given is how to with the top 10 ways to screw up e-learning uh, and how to avoid them. Okay, because I've seen the same steps over and over and over, and yeah, and I've just mentioned a couple of them. So
Yeah. Oh, that is awesome. Those are amazing tips because we've all been there. We've all been at the top 10 of screwing up something, right? And as far as learning goes,
yep.
how many times have I set up templates that I thought were ready because I wanted to turn them out so fast that they weren't ready. As soon as we get it out there, then we got to go back and redo those templates, for example. So, yeah, skipping steps is certainly not one of the the key things with rapid design. But having everything there in place, doing all the steps, covering all the bases, and having the proper templates for whatever tools that your team uses the most are very important. I agree with you. Very nice, Joe. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions?
So this one, I kind of know what you're going to say. You know, that's the you know, I've talked to you so many times that I know exactly what you're going to say. But for the sake of everybody else here, what is the best authoring tool out there?
The best authoring tool is the one that will best serve your needs, and so there is no best authoring tool. Period. It depends on what you're trying to accomplish. Okay. And that means, if you think about it, every authoring tool that is selling out there is selling for some reason. It serves a purpose of some kind. Now, is it true that sometimes people will be convinced to buy an authoring tool that is not going to serve their needs? Absolutely. You know, you have to be careful not to believe every vendor claim out there. And I challenge vendors all the time, but it's easier for me because I've been doing this a long time, and I know the kinds of questions to ask. But if anyone wants to know, you know, send me an email. You can go ahead and put my email address in there if you like, joe@elearningjoe.com, or I can type it myself. But what that means is that I can give you the kinds of questions to ask when it comes to, you know, talking to vendors. The thing about it is, I have a preferred authoring tool, and that's simply because I like to have power in my tools. I think having power is much more important than being able to use a tool out of the box without any real training. Because what you're going to find is that very quickly you're going to hit walls, right? What happens is this: you have you have a design in mind, and of course it always depends on who your audience is, what the content is, and what the context is for that content, right? And how you're going to deliver it. If a tool can't serve your needs for your audience, etc., you don't want to use it. So which tools will serve your needs? It really depends on those three things. So let's say that you are going to be simply doing some software simulation type stuff, real simple stuff. Well, there's a number of tools that can do that, and some of them are cheaper than others, and some of them can be used more quickly than others too. Let's say, on the other hand, you want to do a sort of a PowerPoint type of approach. I hate those. I really do. But I've seen the need for them sometimes when you have to get something out in the next week, and it's got to be done by Tuesday, otherwise forget it, it's not going to be worth anything. Okay, now that maybe is a little bit of should have been given a little more forethought rather than thinking it could be done at the last minute, but whatever, it has to be done, it has to be done. But when it comes down to it, if you got to do something that's a little more complex, like, you know, teach someone the proper steps or procedures and have them actually try them, it's so different to actually tell people these are the steps to take versus take the steps now, prove that you know the stuff, right? Exactly. And that's where the difference is between the simple authoring tools and the more complex ones, the ones that take a few days to learn, because in the end what you need is something that's going to give you that kind of ability to ask the learner and test the learner and have the learner practice. That's the only way to really learn, is to practice, right? So in the end, if I'm working with a new client, for instance, and they say, we're using, you know, Adobe Presenter or Articulate Studio, and that's what we have to have you use, I can deal with that. I can work with that. The problem is that if you try to design and you can't make it fit within your tools options, what often happens is people start to scale back their design. Oh, well, maybe we won't do this drag and drop type of thing, or maybe we won't do this, maybe we won't do that. In the end, what they may design is something that really isn't going to serve the learners because it's such a limited design, because they just couldn't do those kinds of things. So better to use a tool in most cases that will allow you to do more. The tool that I prefer to use the best is Adobe CAPTIVATE, because it gives me a lot more power than most of the tools that are out there, and still is easy enough to use that I can, I can teach someone how to use Adobe CAPTIVATE in a couple of days with no problem, right? But I'm happy using Articulate Storyline. I think it's an elegant tool in many ways. I find that there are certain things about Articulate Storyline I really love that I haven't found in any other tool, for instance. And I've used Articulate Studio, and I've used Adobe Presenter, and I've used iSpring Studio. They all serve a purpose. But in the end, you have to decide, because e-learning is a truly, truly custom need. every organization has to look at what they need. And again, if you want to email me, I can give you some questions to ask there. But once you determine what you really need, then you decide on the tool to use.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree with you. I end up using mostly Storyline because I do need custom content, but I'm not doing a lot of simulations or software simulations and stuff like that, for which I think Captivate works best. It depends on your need exactly. Now, maybe you could walk us through maybe 3-5 questions that you normally ask yourself whenever you're first starting a new project or talking or consulting with a client of yours on a new project, that will help you decide which tool that you pick.
Sure. Okay. Great. So, of course, the 3 questions I asked earlier are the paramount ones. Who's your audience? And that means that answers a bunch of questions right there, because the audience might be worldwide. It might have to be the e-learning might have to be translated to many languages, or take into account a lot of cultural differences and so on. And that, by the way, is going to eliminate a bunch of tools that won't make it easy to translate, stuff,
Mm-hmm.
that make it more cumbersome and such. So that's a question that immediately will start to eliminate some authoring tools from the mix. Besides that, there are other questions you have to ask about the audience, but don't matter as much for tools like, what is their education level, what is their professional level, and so on. I mean, the different, what is their age, range, etc. Okay. Secondly, and also how much time do they actually have to go through the learning? Because if you give them an 80-hour course and they only have 2 hours, a week to do it, it's going to take a long time. Secondly, how does it need to be delivered? If it needs to be delivered to mobile, that eliminates a few tools right there. If it needs to be delivered in a very responsive way, that eliminates almost every tool out there. Okay, and so on. So there's questions to ask there too. And then the content itself is an important one to ask, because you're going to be, as a natural outcome of that content, starting to think about what kinds of interactions you need to design. If you're doing a heart surgery, or a car repair, or anything where you're needing to show a hand, you need to have the person move something on the screen, move the scalpel to the correct position on the artery, or show how to fix a certain part of the car by twisting this or moving that. Anything that requires a set of steps like that, where you need to have them show something, you probably want to have drag and drop in many cases, and that's going to eliminate a few tools right there, right? Mm-hmm. And in fact, one of the vendor things you have to be careful of is when they say, for instance, we can do drag and drop. Sure, they can, but it's very limited and very, very restricted in what you can do in some cases. In other cases, it's much more free form, where you can do almost anything you want. The first one's really easy but limited. The second one is much more powerful, but takes a little extra time to create. So those are the big 3 that I ask at the beginning, because that will eliminate, in my estimation, immediately tools depending on what the answers are. But then I think of all of those, probably the most important is, and only by a little bit, is how is it going to be delivered? Because if it needs to be delivered on older browsers and it needs to be delivered on mobile devices at the same time, we have to have a tool that can accommodate both those needs, and so on. So those are the few things. But there's many of the questions that follow afterwards.
That's awesome. And so you mentioned you have, so basically it's a process of elimination that you're going through, right? I need this, these tools are out of the picture. Now next question, these tools are out. And you end up with a choice of maybe 3 or 4 or whatever it is, the number you're looking for, right? And you said you have some documentation that you can share with our audience on how to make those decisions?
Well, what I have is I developed a document that is my normal questions I ask clients, and it's pretty what's the word I'm looking for? There's a lot of questions in there, but I make it clear at the beginning that they don't have to answer all of them immediately, just whatever they know, and then we'll work on answering the others as needed. But yeah, it's something that I prepared for myself, that I use, and I'm happy to give some some good questions to ask. If people want to email me, I'm happy to do that.
Awesome. So email Joe at elearningjoe.com. Everybody watching. Now or later, he does have a lot of tools, a lot of recommendations and things like that for you. So I think we have maybe 2 or 3 more minutes here, but so for people that are coming and joining you live here in Atlanta, what should they expect to learn from your workshop?
Well, I'm hoping that what they're going to learn, depending on what they know when they come in, is, oh my gosh, I never even heard of that tool, and that can really help us, and let's go investigate that one. I had no idea that was the case, and so on. I'm hoping to open minds. Okay. Now, as I said, I've given this a couple of times before, and I'm always getting I always get a lot of evaluations saying, "Wow, I had no idea. I had no idea. This is really cool." Okay. So it's going to be informational, but I'm leaving time for people to pepper me with any questions, and I will have at my disposal a lot of the tools that I normally do use, or that at least I have reviewed and evaluated, so that I can open up tools and demonstrate things in there as well. There are really 3 levels of tools, and 3 different kinds of tools in essence. You got your PowerPoint add-in tools. You've got your tool that you install on your computer, aside from PowerPoint, outside of PowerPoint, and then you have your cloud-based tools. And so I'll be addressing those as well.
So awesome. So people should be able to just attend and come out with a possible plan in their heads filled with ideas of what tools to investigate, and maybe some specific tools for their own needs, actually, for a project if they have one in mind already.
Hope so. Yeah, that's my plan.
That's awesome. Yeah. I attended maybe a couple of times already a session of yours like that, and I have to say it is pretty cool. We have it's normally very crowded, and people do come out praising all the things that you're sharing there, the knowledge that you have. A lot of tools. I've seen a lot of tools covered in your session. So yeah, it's going to be cool. I'm going to try to attend it myself too. So that's April 14th at what time?
At 5 p.m.
5 p.m. All right. So here's the website where you can sign up. Hopefully you see this, but you can go to atdatlanta.org and look at our calendar and find the future, the present, future, what is it? The past, present, and future of eLearning authoring tools. Yeah, there you go. Woo, the future comes before the past. Anyway, it's too early for me.
I love the sci-fi, yeah.
All right, thank you, Joe, for joining us, and we'll close this, and I hope to see you here in Atlanta soon, April 14th.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Have a good one, guys. Stay warm.